The 2022 Virtual Business Conference, February 25th. Tom Daglis. How to keep your job. The finer points.
It is my honor to introduce Tom Daglis. Tom is a USPTA Master Professional and is the president of the Pelican Tennis Group, providing tennis industry consulting services. He has also joined the firm of McMahon Careers as an executive search consultant and career coach for the racket sports industry. Tom has decades of experience directing private clubs, public facilities, and has directed the professional tennis management programs at Ferris State as well as Methodist University. He has served as USPTA National President, USPTA Southern President, and has received countless national and divisional awards, and is a member of the USPTA Southern Division Hall of Fame. And I give you Tom Daglis.
Thank you, Kevin, and greetings, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today and share this information. Hopefully, you'll be able to pick a few things that you can use in your own careers. So with that, we'll get started. I am going to talk about today the Tennis 10 Commandments, which I'll get into a little more details, how you can better coexist with your GM or your boss, some tennis committees do's and don'ts that I've learned from real experience, and a few things on league team management. So before we get started, I will tell you that having been in the tennis business for over 40 years and visiting so many facilities and talked to so many tennis professionals, I've been witness to a good number of tennis professionals who it seemed had it made at their jobs, only to make avoidable mistakes, and that eventually cost them their job position. So we'll talk about some guidelines that every professional should remember. And before we do that on the Tennis 10 Commandments, I want to make sure I disclose that it's not my intention to make light of the 10 Commandments in the Bible, but simply to adapt them for illustration purposes. So we'll get right into that. And our first one is Tennis Commandment 1. Whoops, here we go. And thou shalt not kill the goose that lays the golden egg. The golden egg is your membership and your clientele. They are the reason that you're making money. And we tend to forget that. We tend to forget to highlight the group of people that we are serving. Be sure to make your membership your first priority. And be careful about getting sidetracked on other projects or entrepreneurial escapades, because by nature, tennis pros, I think, are entrepreneurial. But your clients are the lifeblood of your job, and we need to always remember that first and foremost. Okay. Second one. Let me move this over a little bit. Okay. Thou shalt not steal from the beginner or anyone else who doesn't have a tennis background. And what I'm trying to get across here is always establish your credibility. People look for us for direction as leaders of departments and pros at clubs. And if you sell a $300 racket with gut strings to a beginner, that's going to come back to haunt you sooner or later. And one thing that I think is very important to note, fairness is a characteristic that's difficult to recoup. So make sure that you treat everybody fairly and don't try to take advantage of those who don't have the background. Number 3, thou shalt not commit hanky-panky. So be careful about establishing a social life with your membership or your clientele. It only leads to complications and awkwardness later on. And especially in a club scenario, rumors can get very ugly, and to many people, perception is reality. So whether it's happening or not, it can make its way through the membership, and that could always come back to be a problem. Number 4, thou shalt not give false testimony against your members. So I always say, do what you say and say what you do. Honesty is always the best policy, and I think it's always best to keep a paper trail whenever you're doing things within a club, because you want to have some kind of backup. But in today's world of internet access, it's very, very easy for someone to fact check you. So Make sure that you are being very honest with the people you deal with. Tennis 10 commandment number 5. Thou shalt maintain your tennis course and facility better than anyone else in town. So I think it's very important to make it a priority to have your tennis course a showplace, a facility that you and your members can be very proud of and have bragging rights. So how do you do that? Well, maybe completing a court audit twice a month to monitor the condition of the windscreens, the benches, the fences, the nets, surrounding landscapes. That keeps you on track, whether you're starting to get some minor cracks in the courts or the lines are coming up on the clay. A court audit will periodically help solve that. But it's very important, I think, to be able to showcase what your club is offering to your members and guests. Number 6, thou shalt not present yourself as a false idol. So I think the best way to put it is don't build yourself up more than what you are. And an example that I've seen is tennis professionals will always allude to more skill and more playing ability more than anything else than they really have. And they'll allude to playing Wimbledon or the US Open and they exaggerate their skill level. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you're upfront and you tell people exactly what you've accomplished, and it is what it is. Number 7, thou shalt not take your members or general managers' name in vain. So the walls have ears, and you never want to badmouth your members or your general manager. Gossip spreads like wildfire. It will get back to that person, and I can't stress professionalism enough. You don't realize how much you're showcased in a club. And I like to tell the story. Years ago at a private country club, I was on the Reebok staff, and I was getting Reebok shoes on a regular basis. And in 1 week, I put on a brand new pair of Reebok shoes. Took a lesson with the person. I had the same person 3 days in a row for a lesson. And the second day, I had left the shoes at home, and I happened to have a second pair that was a little bit different, but they were brand new. I put them on. And the third day, I had left those in someplace else, and I ended up putting on a third pair of shoes and brand new shoes. And the member said to me, "You wear new shoes every single day?" And it struck me, how did that person really recognize they were paying attention to my shoes? But the point is that you are always on stage with your members, and you have to make sure that when you present yourself, you keep in mind that it's out there. Number 8, thou shalt have no other sports before me. So here, my point is, tennis is your profession. And, a lot of times tennis pros, which often they enjoy golf, be wary of playing too much golf or giving the impression that you're working just to have golf privileges. I remember interviewing an assistant pro at one of the jobs I had, and when I asked him at the end of the interview, do you have any questions for me? And his only question was, how often do I get to use the golf course? And that sort of flagged some things for me. But remember, interact with your clientele in a friendly manner. Always customer tennis with members. If you participate in a pro-am, don't be that guy that aces the amateurs or fires forehands at the amateur at the net. You want to make sure that you use your abilities for customer tennis to make sure that you're blending into the program. Number 9, thou shalt remember to keep the tournament day holy. So here I'm talking about when you put on an event, do it first class and do it completely. So example would be highlight the event, use visible draw sheets, large visible draw sheets, put the seedings in different colors, Put flower pots around the courtside, use ball kids, use a chair umpire, have favors for the participants, try to include socials, use speakers and microphones, and make it a production. And I think that goes a long way. And again, it goes toward keeping up the pride of the membership for your department. And number 10, thou shalt not covet your member's car. So if you drive a more expensive car than your members, you tend to raise eyebrows about how much money you're making. And members do not like to see employees living at the same standard that they are living at. It causes frictions with members, and they usually have very strong opinions of where you should be on the social ladder. At one private club I was at, my first month at the club, I noticed the golf pro who was a PGA master golf pro, very well highlighted in the industry and at the club. And I know that person was making a ton of money. It was an elite private club. And that person would drive this old beat up yellow Volkswagen to work every day. And two things. One, you knew he was at the club all the time because you couldn't miss this old yellow Volkswagen. So people knew he was always at the club. But I said to myself, I'm going to have lunch with this guy and just find out what's going on. So I did have lunch with him. And I asked him, I know you make a lot of money. What's the deal with your car? And he told me that exactly what I just mentioned to you, that members can sometimes sort of judge you based on what you're driving. And I'm not saying you can't have a nice car. So when I brought that up to him, he said, yeah, I drive an old yellow Volkswagen, but I keep my 2 Mercedes at home in the garage. So he was making the money, but he wasn't flunking it. And I always think that's a good policy. Let's change topics to coexisting with your general manager or a boss. And I have here what's in it for him or her. So to coexist with your general manager, that person doesn't have to be a friend, but you want to make sure you get to know that person. And often a GM has a bonus tied to the bottom line of the budget. So help that person reach that goal. So how do you do that? You expand your food and beverage outings. You maybe assist in acquiring some duties from another department, maybe taking over the aquatics, maybe taking over the fitness, something that will affect the bottom line. And maybe advertising more lunch and dinner specials offered in the clubhouse just to get traffic at the clubhouse. I know we used to put net signs up on by the net post, so when people cross the net, changing sides and during play, they would actually see the menus of what was going on at the club, and it was a good way to keep the members notified on what was being offered in the dining on a daily basis, and the general manager really appreciated that. So, how do you make your general manager or your boss shine? I think it's important to run some complimentary round robins for your club's suppliers and vendors. Remember, again, I go back to your GM is probably getting some kind of bonus based on the bottom line, and has relationships with many suppliers and vendors, and wants to keep those relationships well. So help them. We do round robins in our sleep, so we know it's easy to do. And also, how many of you know that if your general manager actually plays tennis, invite your general manager to some of your social functions to mix with the membership? I think it's important to never miss an opportunity to support or praise your general manager or your club membership at board meetings and any kind of club meetings. I think it's important to highlight your boss in those situations. Pride yourself a worthy team member. So, what am I talking about here? General managers cannot relate to your playing ability. So you got to demonstrate your business skills, do something that they can relate to. So how do you do that? You ask to be included in all the club budget meetings, and I think it's important for the top boards of clubs to see you in business attire sometimes not just tennis attire. When you're wearing tennis attire, people always think you're having fun and you're recreating, but for us, it's work, and you have to sort of show your clientele that there's another side. Business skills, highlight those business skills. Know your P&Ls. Relate everything in percentages and variances, because that's how the club does it. Offer improvements and create programs that don't have an additional cost, because what I hear a lot is pros will say, well, if you build me 4 more courts, I can raise this department to this level. Well, those 4 courts is a capital expense, and you got to put the money out before you get the money back. So what can you do to make sure that you're not adding an additional cost immediately? The goal is to make your general manager view you as a peer versus an employee. All right, we'll jump topics again to tennis committee, some do's and don'ts. And a couple of points I think are important. You should always begin a committee meeting with an agenda and a timetable. And I don't think it hurts to actually having some actual time restraints on certain topics, because sometimes meetings can get out of hand. I love the one person that told me one time that he makes everybody stand up in a meeting because the meeting will go faster if they're not sitting down. I thought that was kind of unique. But always give at least 2-week notice for meetings, preferably set it on the same day and time each month, because other people have schedules just like you and you want attendance. Know the mind of your tennis committee members. And then also be courteous and fair to all the members. Always deal with the issues at hand. And the problems at hand. Don't let it fester. I think it's important to take those things head on. I'll share one quick story. At one of the clubs I was at, my tennis committee chair was the executive vice president of Equifax, a very high position, and very talented person. And we were trying to get a new clubhouse built in the tennis department. So we're going to the board meeting for the final vote. And so I turned to him as we're walking to the clubhouse, and I'm saying, well, how do you think this is going to go? And he turned to me and he stopped and he said, always know the outcome of the board vote before you enter the meeting. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, I've already talked to each person individually. I know exactly what's going to happen, and we're going to get that clubhouse. And I will never forget that to be able to vet everybody at the meeting, just to get their mind and to know what's going to happen. Him being in a corporate environment his entire life, I thought that was invaluable information. So when you feel compelled to disagree, do it in a diplomatic way. Remember, most people don't make decisions logically. They wear their decisions on their sleeve. They usually vote emotionally. Always have a copy of the bylaws. I think that's very important, because sometimes it's a good backup for you to when you don't accept an idea if it's against the policies of the club. And I think it's always important to begin any tennis committee meeting with a State of the Union of the tennis department. In other words, what have you done? What have you accomplished? What are you doing? And not only is that so important to educate the tennis committee, because a lot of times they don't know everything that's going on, it is a great way for you to keep track of what you're doing at the club. So when you have a review, you have everything already done. Surveys, lots of surveys. I think that's very, very important. Find out what members want, and always start and stop on time. I think it's important to know why certain people are on the tennis committee. Some have a junior player that they want to make sure the junior program grows. Some are a league player. They want to see more activities for league players. Some want more clinics. So everybody sort of has an agenda. And I think it's important to kind of do some research and know those things. Some don'ts. Never assign duties to those who don't want the assignment. It's hard to fire a volunteer. And if someone doesn't want it, it's not going to get done. So you want to make sure you find the enthusiastic person who wants to accept an assignment. Never leave a committee meeting without minutes of the meeting, so you know exactly what took place. Don't get involved with personalities. Try to keep everything on the issues, because some of these, I'm sure some of you have been in some meetings where the level of intensity was quite high, and you just want to make sure you refrain from that. Don't be afraid to ask for help from your committee and take on certain roles. I think it's important to not let anyone press your panic button, and never attempt to force your conclusions on other members. In other words, don't lose your cool. And people are always going to have their own agendas, and you just want to make sure that you can relate to some of those. All right, let's talk about league team management. Working for around league teams is a difficult job for the tennis director and the tennis professional. So a few things that I have learned: suggest and recommend, and never mandate. I think it's creates problems if you say this has to be the way we do things. I think there should be guidelines for moving up and down, and I always try to get the support of the captain and even some of the league team members. Playing the line of an individual's comfort level, I think that's so important, because some people, if you push them too high in a lineup, they don't perform well because of the pressure and the stress of playing at a high level. Some people just prefer to be at number 5 or a lower number on the lineup, and they are able to be in a more comfortable level when they play. Some people don't like being on the first court. And then also, what if you make the playoffs? I mean, do you play your strength? Do you have different rules for that? And I think those things should be outlined before you start. And in fact, handling all these things before you start the season is probably the most successful way to run your lineups. I'd be interested to know how many of you do lineups, and maybe there's a chat area you can just put in if you actually are responsible for doing the lineup for your league teams. All right, partners. League team management with partners. Explain the benefits of selecting the right partner. You know, tennis players are smart. They understand that there are certain things that make a better partnership, and you want to present those things to them. What side of the court do you prefer? Who takes the most important points? Who likes to serve more? Which player is more mobile? That's a huge part of which side to play. And then how teams are complementing each other to get the best out of the team. Enthusiasm, personalities, those are extra things I think are very important. They know the benefits, and I think you want to make sure you highlight that. It's easier if you are involved with the partnership side. And you know, people sometimes have problems playing. You always get calls, you know, I can't really play with this person anymore. There's a problem. And just like everybody else, I had the same problem. So I decided to send out a survey to tell me how many, you know, who you would like to play with. And it kind of backfired me, because what I got in return was a long list of people that they wouldn't play with. So it kind of went backfired. But again, these are things you learn, and this is why I'm putting this in my talk here to try to share some of my mistakes to help you. All right, so next one, practice lesson times. Everybody has a favorite pro, and that can get kind of crazy if you're at a big club, and especially if the director is very good and can only teach a certain amount of hours, that sometimes makes it more difficult. So group teaching with multiple pros, rotating multiple courts, I think that works best. Also, I think you have to rotate best time slots. And then also, I think it's important to get commitment contracts. And I'll explain what I mean by that. These are a couple that I've used in the past, and I've sort of modified them over the years too. But I like to put everything out in front, and I even ask them to sign it and return it. And if they don't do that, I have my staff call them and try to get the answers. But I try to highlight certain things like how long the practices are going to be, the cost of the practices, how we customize the practice schedules. Here you see, I even had a way of when I had an indoor court facility and the courts were a premium, I had to make sure I knew up front how many courts we're going to be using. So I had that little plan set up. And then also cancellation. Everybody gets cancellations. Everybody hates cancellations. But I actually put in there, outside 48 hours, if you give me a cancellation within the 48 hours, I don't charge you. But outside you get charged, and it's down in print. The next one, I actually went a little bit further, and because our practices were very goal-oriented, I actually and would work on practices from week to week and add certain things. So I wanted to make sure I knew who was coming to practices and how many people were going to be there. I let them know that you get the most out of your practices if there's 4 in a court, and sometimes we modify it, but that was the preference. And then also I had something in there about you're responsible for finding a practice sub if you can't make the lesson, and this way that practice sub will pay your fee and you're not penalized. But if you just don't show up and you don't find a practice sub, we bill. So these were some things that worked for me. I'm sure it doesn't work for every club, but I do think highlighting certain things up front and making sure communication is so valuable that everybody's on the same page, and you sort of get through any possible problems ahead of time. So team formation. It's important to know what's the priority for the team. As we know, some teams are more social. Some teams are trophy hungry. They want to win no matter what. So it's important to know that up front and have that discussion with the team. I go back to, if the team is successful, how do they want to compete in the playoffs? Do they still want to play their strength, or do they have a rule that, hey, everybody has to play X amount of times, and now in the playoffs you got to play a weaker lineup, but know it ahead of time. So one club in Florida I was at, it was a racket club, and I kind of I don't want to say joke about it, but I kind of came through the ABC personalities of levels of the league team. And we didn't have NTRP ratings at that time. It was just A, B, and C. But I found out that the A players, obviously they were the best players. And by being the best players, they won't play or practice with anybody lower than them. That kind of was their personality for an A player. The B player, all B players, they're not good enough to be the A's, but to counter, they know every rule there is in tennis, and they are not afraid to jump on the rules. And then the C level players, we allowed coaching in this league that we had, and I'd go up to a court, a C court, and I'd ask them what was going on. And the first question that they would ask me is, "Do you know who brought the brownies today?" So it's all relative, but I thought that was kind of fun. And I'll tell you one mistake that I made with league teams. I had put the teams, when I did the team uniforms, I had put each team in a different pastel colors. The A's were pink, the B's were pastel blues, and the C's were pastel yellows. And the problem I came across was that everybody knew your level just by wearing the outfit, and quickly decided not to continue with that policy. But these are the things that you learn, and hopefully you won't make some of the same mistakes that I have made. So we can become very complacent. Everybody wants job longevity, and it is an issue in our club. There's a lot of turnover, but there are tennis pros that have been at facilities 20 plus years, and I bet that they're following a lot of the 10 commandments and some of the avoidable mistakes of operations. So with that, that concludes my presentation. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to try to address anything.
Tom, thanks. This is Pat. You did a great job. This was awesome information. I had looked at maybe putting a poll up to ask people about whether they did lineups or not. But the way the system works, only the host company would see the answers and we wouldn't see it. So, but here's one that has just come in. How did you deal with the members that weren't real crazy about you, if that was ever happened?
Well, it certainly is something that happens, I think, regularly. And the key is to find the pro that they are crazy about and make sure that person is highlighted. Now, and some of the things I mentioned about coaching with the rotation, I think it's important to include everybody in that. But if someone, has a problem with you, then have your staff or that person reach out to that person and try to make that person an ambassador to your program, even though it's not coming directly from you.
So in that sort of a case, that we'll say the squeaky wheel, even if it's somebody that doesn't necessarily dislike you, but they're always have something. I know you've seen these people and been around them for years. Do you end up spending much more time with those people? How do you deal with that person?
Well, you're always going to, like when you have that squeaky wheel that you mentioned, there's always going to be someone that needs more TLC, I guess is the best way to put it. And I think trying to convert that person from a complainer to an ambassador is the best way to handle that. If you can get that person to buy in on some of the things you're doing. I know what I would try to do sometimes from the retail side. I would get vendors to say, hey, we got a package of something that we can give to one of your members, and I would try to go to that person and sort of highlight that person with a package of product, and of course that sort of changed their philosophy on the program to a more positive one. But it takes energy, it takes time, and it's something that's unavoidable. We're always going to have people that require more attention.
Yes, so true. That's good. Basically, what I heard you say was buy them off if possible. And Daryl Lewis sends in a quote, which I believe might be from a Hall of Famer. He says, "You are going to tick off 4% of the members every year. Try to tick off the same 4%." Right.
That's just to make sure you keep your longevity at the club, and I think that's a very relative quote. Yes.
I believe that was from Peter Howell.
It was.
Very good. Let's see. I don't have any other questions at this point. So I wonder if Mr. Theo's had any questions, because he usually has a good question or two that comes in handy. But otherwise, let's see if Kevin has anything. All right, Tom, did you put up information of how to contact you?
Oh, yes, I could do that. And let's move this over here.
I think that's good for anybody that might have questions. You've got a lot of information you shared with us here today.
Well, let me see what's happening with my PowerPoint here.
In the past, since you asked the question of everybody, did you personally do lineups for teams as you're looking, or did you leave that to the teams?
I've done both. I've been at places where that was required, and the history of the club, that was something that the membership was used to, and it was sort of baked into the job description. And I think it's important to say that every club is different. And doing the surveys up front and getting the information on how the club operates, that's so important, so you don't make the mistakes. My PowerPoint is freezing here, so I don't see.
Well, that's okay. I can send this out to the attendees and make sure they have some information.
And I'll send you the PowerPoint if you'd like to forward it to everybody.
Yeah, we can put that out as we do in evaluations. We can also include a link to the PowerPoint, which was great.
Oh,
there it is.
There it is.
We'll leave that sitting there for a second. I like this. Yeah, I had a club that required me to, or all the ladies wanted me, 7 teams, they wanted me to be in charge of all the movement of players between the teams. And I tried for 5 years to get out of that and let everybody know how nervous I was of it. But it worked, and they trusted me. Yeah,
it's difficult, Pat, and to me that 4% can end up being a 40% if you have to do too much of your own opinion rather than getting buy-ins from everybody. Buy-in is the key, I think.